I started dreaming someone else's life 3 months ago, and now I can't tell where she ends and I begin. Every night, when I close my eyes, I become Emma Cole, not in some vague, dreamlike way. I mean, I am her, completely. I see through her eyes, feel her emotions, live her moments as if they're my own. And when I wake up, the memories linger like smoke, fading but never quite disappearing. The dreams started the night I moved into the apartment on Riverside Drive. I'd signed the lease without seeing the place in person. A desperate decision after my breakup forced me to find somewhere new, fast. The landlord, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, had seemed almost relieved when I'd agreed to take it. It's been empty for a while, she'd said on the phone. Good bones, though. Lots of light. What she didn't mention was the way the afternoon sun hit the hardwood floors at exactly the angle to make you feel nostalgic for moments you'd never lived, or how the apartment seemed to hold its breath in the early morning hours, as if waiting for something. The first dream came that very first night. I was standing in a kitchen I didn't recognize, sunlight streaming through a window over the sink. My hands, Emma's hands, were washing a coffee mug, and I could feel the warm water, smell the dish soap. Someone was talking behind me, a man's voice, saying something about picking up groceries on the way home. I'll make spaghetti tonight, I heard myself say, Emma's voice, not mine. Your famous spaghetti? The man laughed. I'm holding you to that. I turned to look at him, and that's when I woke up. My own apartment, my own bed. But the dream felt more real than the morning light filtering through my unfamiliar windows. I wrote it down in a notebook I kept by my bed. A habit from therapy, documenting dreams to process stress. I noted every detail I could remember: the kitchen, the man's laugh, the feeling of domesticity and warmth. And I wrote the name that had felt as natural as breathing: Emma Cole. The dreams continued night after night, each one a window into Emma's life. I dreamed of her teaching a classroom of middle schoolers, her frustration mixed with affection as she tried to explain fractions to a boy who wouldn't stop tapping his pencil. I dreamed of her running through a park in the early morning, her breath forming clouds in the cold air, her muscles burning pleasantly. I dreamed of her sitting in a coffee shop, working on a laptop, occasionally glancing up to watch people pass by the window. And I dreamed of her apartment, the same layout as mine, but decorated differently. Plants everywhere, books stacked on every surface, a blue couch where mine was gray. By the second week, I'd filled 30 pages in my dream diary. Emma's life was becoming as familiar to me as my own. The man from the first dream appeared often. His name was James, and they'd been together for 2 years. She had a sister named Kelly who called every Sunday. She liked her coffee black, hated cilantro, and had a scar on her left knee from a bicycle accident when she was 12. I knew all of this as intimately as if I'd lived it myself. The strange part, the part that kept me up late staring at my notebook, was that the dreams were sequential. They weren't random fragments, but a continuous narrative, nights building on previous nights, like watching a TV series one episode at a time. And they all took place in the past. I could tell by small details: the phones people used, the movies they referenced, the date on a newspaper I'd glimpsed in one dream. Everything suggested the early 1990s. On a Saturday afternoon, 3 weeks into the dreams, I finally worked up the courage to search for Emma Cole online. My laptop sat open on my kitchen table, the search bar blinking, waiting. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Part of me was afraid of what I'd find. Part of me was more afraid of finding nothing at all. I typed, Emma Cole, teacher, 1990s. The results loaded slowly and my heart sank. Too many Emma Coles, none of them obviously the right one. I refined the search, adding details from the dreams. Emma Cole, 447 Maple Street. The address I'd seen on a piece of mail in one dream. That's when I found it. A newspaper article from July 1994. The headline made my breath catch. Local teacher missing. Police seek information on Emma Cole, 29. My hands were shaking as I clicked the link. The article was brief, pulled from archives. Emma Cole, a seventh grade mathematics teacher at Roosevelt Middle School, was reported missing on July 15, 1994. Cole, 29, was last seen leaving her apartment at 447 Maple Street on the evening of July 14th. Her car was found abandoned at Riverside Park 3 days later. Police are asking anyone with information to contact. The article included a photo. Even in the grainy, digitized image, I recognized her immediately, the woman from my dreams. Emma Cole was real, and she'd disappeared 30 years ago. I sat at my table as the afternoon light faded, reading every article I could find about her case. There weren't many. Emma Cole had vanished without a trace, and after a few months of investigation, the story had faded from the news. No body was ever found. No suspects were ever named. She simply stopped existing. Except now, she existed in my dreams. That night, I went to sleep with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, half hoping I wouldn't dream of her, half desperate to see what happened next. The dream that came was different from the others. Emma was packing a bag, her movements hurried and nervous. It was evening, the apartment, my apartment, lit only by a table lamp. She kept glancing at the door as if expecting someone to burst through at any moment. I should have told someone, I heard her mutter, Emma's thoughts transparent to me in the dream. I should have gone to the police immediately. She was afraid, deeply, viscerally afraid. There was a knock at the door. Emma froze, the sweater she'd been folding still clutched in her hands. Emma, a man's voice, not James, someone else. Emma, I know you're in there. We need to talk. She didn't move toward the door. Instead, she grabbed her purse and headed for the bedroom window. I could feel her panic, her certainty that opening that door would be a terrible mistake. The window stuck. Old paint sealed it shut. Emma pulled harder, her breath coming fast, tears starting to blur her vision. The knocking became pounding. Emma, don't make this harder than it has to be. She finally got the window open just as I heard the sound of the front door, my front door, being kicked in. And then I woke up gasping, my own bedroom window open to the cool night air, as if I'd opened it myself in my sleep. I turned on every light in my apartment and made coffee at 3 a.m., too shaken to even consider going back to sleep. Emma had been running from someone. She'd been terrified, and whatever had happened to her had happened in this apartment. The next day, I went to the public library and requested access to the full police file on Emma Cole's disappearance. As a journalist, my actual profession, I had some pull, and after explaining I was researching a story on cold cases, they let me view the archived documents. The file was thin. Emma Cole had been reported missing by her boyfriend, James Morrison, when she didn't show up for a dinner they'd planned. Her apartment had shown signs of a struggle: a broken lamp, papers scattered, but no blood, no obvious evidence of violence. Her car had been found 3 days later at Riverside Park, keys still in the ignition. The investigating officer's notes mentioned interviewing James extensively, but he'd had an alibi. He'd been at work until 8 p.m., and Emma was believed to have disappeared earlier in the evening. They'd also interviewed Emma's colleagues, her sister Kelly, her neighbors. One interview caught my attention. A neighbor, Gerald Hutchins, from apartment 3B, had reported hearing raised voices from Emma's apartment around 6 p.m. on the night she disappeared, but he couldn't identify who was arguing or what was said. Gerald Hutchins. The name meant nothing to me, but I made a note of it. The police had investigated a few leads: a former student who'd sent Emma inappropriate letters, a colleague who'd been seen arguing with her. But nothing had panned out. The case had gone cold within 6 months. I photographed every page of the file with my phone and went home to study them. That night's dream picked up exactly where the previous one had left off. Emma had climbed out the bedroom window onto the fire escape. Below her, the alley was dark and empty. She could hear someone inside the apartment, footsteps moving through the rooms, searching. She climbed down as quietly as she could, her hands slipping on the rusty metal. When she reached the ground, she ran. The dream followed her through dark streets, her heart pounding, checking over her shoulder every few seconds. She ended up at Riverside Park, hiding in her car, trying to decide what to do. In the dream, I could access her thoughts clearly now. She'd discovered something at school: financial irregularities in the budget, money being siphoned off. She'd confronted the principal, Mr. Hutchins, about it that afternoon. He'd laughed it off, said she must be mistaken, but his eyes had been cold. And then she'd come home to find her apartment had been searched. Papers she'd kept in her desk, copies of the financial records, were gone. She should go to the police, she knew that. But she was afraid. Hutchins had connections. He was respected. Who would believe a 29-year-old teacher over a principal with 20 years of service? In the dream, Emma sat in her car crying, trying to decide what to do. And then headlights filled her rear-view mirror. A car pulled up behind her, blocking her in. The driver's door opened and a figure approached through the glare of the headlights. Emma threw her car into drive, but it was too late. Her door was yanked open, and I woke up before I could see who it was. But I knew. Principal Gerald Hutchins, the same man who'd been her neighbor, who'd lived in apartment 3B. The same man who'd reported hearing raised voices but claimed he couldn't identify them. He'd lived right below her. He would have known her schedule, her routines. And if she'd discovered he was embezzling from the school. I was shaking as I turned on my lamp and grabbed my phone. It was 4:17 a.m., but I couldn't wait. I started searching for Gerald Hutchins. What I found made my blood run cold. Gerald Hutchins had been principal of Roosevelt Middle School from 1987 to 1996. He'd retired under mysterious circumstances. The articles were vague, mentioning administrative changes and pursuing other opportunities. He'd died in 2003, according to his obituary, heart attack. But in 1995, just a year after Emma disappeared, the school district had quietly settled a lawsuit regarding missing funds. The details were sealed, but the timing was impossible to ignore. Hutchins had been embezzling. Emma had discovered it, and he'd killed her to keep her quiet. I was sure of it now, not in a way I could prove, but in the deep, certain way you know things that have been shown to you in dreams. But why was Emma showing me? Why now, 30 years later? I didn't have to wait long for the answer. That night's dream was different. Emma wasn't living a moment from her past. She was present somehow, aware. We stood together in the apartment, my apartment, but also hers, and she looked directly at me, not through her own eyes, but at me, as if I were really there. You can see me, she said, her voice filled with wonder and relief. I've been dreaming your life, I said, and somehow in the dream this made perfect sense. Every night for 3 months. I know, she said, I've been trying to reach someone for so long, but you're the first person who's lived here could who could receive it. Receive what? The truth. She gestured around the apartment. This place holds memory, my memories. They soaked into the walls, the floors, the air itself. When I died, when he killed me, I wasn't ready. I had unfinished business, a story that needed to be told. Hutchins killed you, I said. The principal. He was embezzling, and you found out. Emma nodded. He came to my apartment that night, broke in when I tried to run, caught me at the park. He made it look like I'd driven there myself, then left the car and vanished. He knew everyone would assume I'd run away or been abducted by a stranger. And it worked. No one ever suspected him. But there's no evidence, I said. He's been dead for 20 years. How can I prove any of this? Emma smiled sadly. You can't prove he killed me. But you can prove he embezzled, and you can tell my story. So, I'm not just a cold case file, not just a mystery. So, people know what happened to me. How? The evidence I collected, the papers that were stolen from my apartment. I had copies. I mailed them to my sister, Kelly, the day before I died. I called her and told her to keep them safe, but I never got the chance to explain why. She probably threw them away years ago, or maybe she still has them in a box somewhere. Find Kelly. Tell her about the dreams. Tell her what I showed you. The dream was fading, Emma becoming translucent. Wait, I called out. Is that all? Is that why you've been showing me your life? She paused at the threshold of visibility. No, I showed you my life because I wanted someone to know I existed, not just the tragedy of my death, but the fullness of my life, the coffee shops and the teaching and the love and the ordinary beautiful moments. I wanted to be remembered as more than a victim. I'll remember, I promised. I'll make sure everyone does. Emma smiled, and then she was gone. I woke to morning light, tears on my face, and absolute certainty about what I needed to do. Finding Kelly took 3 days of investigative work. She'd married, moved to Seattle, changed her name to Kelly Rhodes. When I called her, explaining who I was and why I was contacting her, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. You've been dreaming about Emma, she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. Every night for 3 months. I know this sounds impossible. No, Kelly interrupted. It doesn't. Emma and I were twins. Not identical, but we had this connection. After she disappeared, I dreamed about her too, for years. Always the same dream, her trying to tell me something I couldn't quite hear. We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything, the dreams, the discovery of the embezzlement, Hutchins. And I asked about the papers Emma had mailed. Kelly went quiet again. Then, I have them. I never knew what they were. Just financial documents from the school. Emma called me the day I received them, sounded scared, and said she'd explain when she saw me that weekend. But she never made it to that weekend. I kept the papers because they were the last thing she sent me, but I never looked at them closely. Can you look at them now? 3 days later, I had copies of everything. Emma's meticulous documentation of Hutchins' embezzlement, bank records, forged receipts, everything needed to prove what he'd done. I wrote the story as a journalist, but also as someone who'd lived alongside Emma for 3 months. I told her story, not just her disappearance, but her life. The teacher who loved her students, the sister who called every Sunday, the woman who ran in the early morning and drank her coffee black and was trying to do the right thing when she was murdered for it. The article was published in a major newspaper with national distribution. It reignited interest in Emma's case. The police reopened the investigation, and with the financial evidence and a new understanding of motive, they officially named Gerald Hutchins as the prime suspect in Emma Cole's murder. They never found her body, but her story was finally told. The dreams stopped after the article was published. I slept dreamlessly for the first time in months, and when I woke, I felt both relieved and bereft. Emma was gone, her mission completed, her memory preserved. But she left me with something I'd carry forever, the understanding that lives, even interrupted lives, stolen lives, deserve to be witnessed in their fullness, that we're all more than our endings, more than our tragedies. Emma Cole lived 29 years of beautiful, ordinary, meaningful life before it was taken from her. And through some mystery of memory and place and connection, she'd been able to share that life with me to ensure that she would be remembered not as a cold case, but as a complete person. I still live in the apartment on Riverside Drive. Sometimes, in the quiet, early morning hours, I swear I can feel a presence. Not frightening, just peaceful, a sense of satisfaction, of completion. And sometimes, when the afternoon light hits the hardwood floors at just the right angle, I feel that strange nostalgia again. But now I understand it. It's not my nostalgia I'm feeling, it's Emma's. A life lived in this space, soaked into the walls, held in the air itself. A life that reached across 30 years and the boundary of death to say, I was here, I mattered, remember me, and I do. Every day I remember.